In 2009, soon after southern Taiwan was devastated by Typhoon Maracut, 7 DPP mayors jointly invited the Dalai Lama to come and pray for the disaster victims. The venue of the Dalai Lama's Blessing Assembly was not announced until the last minute. Despite the immense political pressure, the True Enlightenment Education Foundation fearlessly and quickly mobilized 400 members to head to Kaohsiung in order to reveal the Dalai Lama's hypocrisy, the fact that he teaches the Lamas to have sexual misconduct with other people's wives and daughters, and the truth about his evil religion. Protest activity drew widespread attention across the island and caused the support for the Dalai Lama coming from the wiser and more prominent people in Taiwan to dwindle. Today, the Dalai Lama's influence in Taiwan has become very limited. This DVD is a record of the protest activity that we held outside the venue of the Dalai Lama's Blessing Assembly. It aims to reveal the true face of the Dalai Lama. The True Enlightenment Education Foundation is dedicated to promoting the inner insight philosophy of Tathagatagarbha. Its mission statement is to care for life, educate people, and maintain good social ethics and morals. It fully dedicates itself to various aspects of education, whether it is social, spiritual, holistic, or even related to family affairs. It aspires to disseminate the inner insight philosophy and the accurate essence of Buddhism, propagate the correct life perception, and explore the truth of life. Its foremost goal is to help people attain Buddhahood through peaceful and orderly cultivation. The True Enlightenment Education Foundation has long been striving to relieve poverty and has been granting poverty scholarships. It continuously organizes academic seminars and publishes the Journal of True Enlightenment with a view to uplifting the research level of the academic world. It has made significant contributions and achieved meaningful results in the establishment of good social morals and reassuring the hearts and minds of the public. The True Enlightenment Education Foundation comprises many academic experts who have thoroughly studied the doctrines of Tantric Lamaism and have uncovered concrete evidence that cannot be refuted by the followers of Lamaism. Thus, they thoroughly understand the fundamental doctrines of Lamaism. Venerable Pings Xiao of the True Enlightenment Education Foundation has published 4 big volumes of Behind the Facade of Tibetan Buddhism, which have revealed the truth about Tibetan Buddhism so far hidden behind its mysterious veil, and have exposed it to the public eye. The truth is that the core doctrine of Tibetan Buddhism consists of the couple practice Tantra. The lustful copulation practice between a male and a female is viewed as the ultimate cultivation method. The middle way view of Tibetan Buddhism, based on the 6 Vijnanas theory, actually violates the absolute truth taught by Buddha Sakyamuni, which is the undefiled Tathagatagarbha Dharma of the 8 Vijnanas theory. The book Behind the Facade of Tibetan Buddhism has completely unmasked the erroneous knowledge, concepts, cultivation methods, as well as sexual misconduct of Lamaistic practitioners. Given that Taiwanese people are generally honest and simple, they have no ability to tell that the doctrines, teachings, and cultivation methods of Lamaism all contradict those of Buddhism. As a result, some individuals erroneously consider Tibetan Buddhism to be orthodox Buddhism and Lamas to be true monastic practitioners, and make huge donations to them. Therefore, the Lamas in exile around the world all consider Taiwan to be their top destination. Formosa, Taiwan seems to have become the major financial donor to the Tibetan government in exile. Not only have Lamas drained the Taiwanese people's hard-earned money, but they have also sexually abused many Taiwanese females. At the Tibetan centers all around the island, countless cases of sexual assault committed by Lamas have been reported. The ones disclosed by the media are only the tip of the iceberg. The Foundation could not bear seeing sentient beings whose original intent was to follow the path of peaceful cultivation, but due to their ignorance, have unexpectedly become victims of dreadful sexual abuses. Because they have been misled, they are now mired in the misconception that cultivation must be done via the pursuit of sexual pleasure. They have gone the complete opposite direction of the Buddhahood way, and have thus terminated their wisdom life of the Dharmakaya. They may even fall to the evil paths before they know it. More importantly, the Foundation could not turn a blind eye to the fact that Lamas, who depend on Buddhism and at the same time steal Buddhism's resources, claim themselves to be Dharma kings and destroy the Buddha's Dharma. Therefore, the True Enlightenment Education Foundation must courageously step forward to turn the tide and uphold the Buddha's true Dharma. For more than 10 years, it has been making vigorous efforts to save sentient beings out of erroneous and poisonous teachings from the Tibetan Buddhist Lamas. To this aim, the Foundation has published books, periodicals, brochures, and pamphlets totaling millions of copies. Apart from the 4 big volumes of Behind the Facade of Tibetan Buddhism, the Foundation has published a wide range of books and other information materials. The Foundation has directed all its efforts towards the following goals: to protect females from being sexually abused by Lamas, to protect the Buddhist practitioners who want to learn the Buddha Dharma from being deceived and misled, to uphold the Buddha's true Dharma, to rid Buddhism of non-Buddhist elements and restore it to its original state, to tell the world that Lamaism, based on the couple practice Tantra, is definitely not Buddhism. In Lamaism, those who are able to remain concentrated during sexual climax for a long period of time without ejaculating can claim to have achieved the union of bliss and emptiness in the highest yoga tantra. For Tibetan Buddhist practitioners, this method of sexual union can help purify their minds. Therefore, among the Lamas who have come to Taiwan, the cunning ones beguile Taiwanese women by calling them with the euphemism Buddha Mother. Some of those victims are seduced by the superficial appellation Buddha Mother and thus willfully help the Lamas amass wealth through illicit methods. Those who are less skillful at deceiving use cultivation as an excuse to sexually abuse attractive female followers, thus making Taiwanese women their sexual outlets during the couple practice Tantra. This has caused many female followers whose original intent was to follow the peaceful path of Buddhist cultivation to sink into boundless pain and agony. Instead of condemning such misconduct, the Dalai Lama openly teaches the Lamas in his writings that sexual behavior can lead to the achievement of yoga. The Dalai Lama publicly preaches cultivation through sexual intercourse, as evidenced by the teachings found in many of his books. In his book, Sleeping, Dreaming, and Dying, the Dalai Lama says, In both ordinary sexual intercourse and in the sexual union practiced by advanced tantric practitioners, the regenerative fluids move to the point of the genitals. The difference between the two types of sexual act is the control of the flow of regenerative fluids. Tantric practitioners are asked to control the flow of regenerative fluids. Therefore, experienced tantric practitioners are able to reverse the flow of regenerative fluids even when they have reached the tip of the genitals and are on the verge of being released. In his book, The Power of Compassion, the Dalai Lama teaches the Lamas that in Tibetan Buddhism, sexual union is particularly obvious in images that show the copulation tantra between some Buddhas and their sexual partners. This often gives people false impressions. The Dalai Lama says it is true that in those instances they are using their sexual organs. However, the flow of energy is entirely under their control. They are able to completely retract the seminal energy into the body without leaking a single drop. In reality, no one within the community of Lamaism, including the Dalai Lama himself and all the Lamas, has the skill to retract the semen after ejaculation, contrary to what the Dalai Lama pretends. All his statements are merely lies meant to deceive the public. Even if in the future some Lamas can perform this trick in public after assiduous practice, all he will achieve is to retract the semen into the bladder rather than into the seminal vesicles, where it was originated. A simple medical examination will corroborate this fact. The semen that is retracted into the bladder will simply be released from the body during urination. The Dalai Lama's claim that it will be retracted into the seminal vesicles is a blatant lie. Therefore, obtaining this skill after 10 years of assiduous practice is just meaningless. Even after one masters every aspect of this method, and can indeed hold a woman 16 hours a day in the union of bliss and emptiness, and can even retract the semen into the bladder, such state of bliss and emptiness really has nothing to do with the realization contents of the three-vehicle bodhi taught by Buddha Sakyamuni. This is not the true essence of the Buddha Dharma. Instead, it is simply a trick destined to fool people and obtain free sex with female followers. It is also a means to exploit these poor women by requesting large donations from them. In essence, those Lamas are super-skilled male prostitutes. The Dalai Lama has warned the Lamas against ejaculating semen during sexual intercourse. In the event that the semen has leaked, it must be swallowed, otherwise it would be a violation of the Samaya precepts. In Q&A between the Dalai Lama and the Chinese Buddhist delegation, there is an excerpt about the Dalai Lama's teachings. During the couple practice Tantra, in case the semen is ejaculated, the practitioner must be able to retract every single drop of it, or he would violate the principles of the practice that involves the cutting off of desires, and would have committed a grave sin. Consequently, there are many news reports about Lamas who force women to swallow their semen once they have sexually abused them. In his book, The Dalai Lama at Harvard, the Dalai Lama states the following: when we experience subtler level of minds, this level of consciousness can then be transformed into wisdom that understands emptiness, selflessness. In order to do this, first, the practitioner has to stop the grosser levels of consciousness. And to do this, it is necessary to bring about the change of the movement of the white and red basic constituents. This is where sex becomes involved. The strongest change in the level of consciousness that can be utilized by a practitioner occurs during sex. Because of this fact, sex is used as a technique of tantric path. In the book A Survey of the Paths of Tibetan Buddhism, the Dalai Lama explains that in these 4 different states, the most effective way to further one's cultivation is through sexual activity. Even though I use the common term sexual climax, I'm not referring to ordinary sexual activities, but rather to the visualization of sexual union with a consort. The Dalai Lama also requires the lamas to find a female consort in the flesh to practice the copulation tantra with. He states that if the practitioner merely relied on the visualization of a consort, his cultivation would be fruitless. As the Dalai Lama points out in his book, The Union of Bliss and Emptiness, in Gathya Samaja, in the section related to entering into union with a live consort, visualizing deities on her body becomes an actual body mandala practice. But if one is entering into union with a visualized consort, it does not. This is written in black and white. The Dalai Lama has thus proved that he is responsible for leading the lamas into cultivation through sexual intercourse. He cannot escape the blame. News reports about lamas sexually abusing women are not just common in Taiwan, but are also widespread in Europe and in the US. For instance, in 1994, the renowned author of the best-selling book, The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, Soja Rinpoche, was accused in San Francisco of coercing and sexually abusing female followers. These are not isolated cases, because lamas are taught from a young age that the couple practice of the highest yoga tantra is the ultimate practice and cultivation method. The various cultivation steps that precede it are just tools to prepare this main practice. Eventually, one must find a consort to practice the copulation tantra with. The Dalai Lama's assertions in his book, The World of Tibetan Buddhism, an overview of its philosophy and practice, clearly indicate that once a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner reaches an advanced level, he will be required to find a female or male consort who will propel him into the cultivation path. During the copulation tantra, sexual union, if the male has a higher cultivation level, he can help his female partner achieve Buddhahood. Based on these teachings from the Dalai Lama, all the lamas, one after another, strictly obey him and pervasively hunt couple practice partners. If they cannot find any suitable women to be their consorts, then resorting to their own mothers, daughters, sisters, and in the worst case, female animals are acceptable too. Indeed, Tsongkhapa, the patriarch of Lamaism, said for those who have not accepted the Samaya precepts, performing sexual acts with nuns, one's own mother, sisters, daughters, or female animals would be considered a basic grave sin. However, after one has received the secret empowerment, not only will adopting the copulation tantra as a cultivation method not violate the Samaya precepts, but instead it will bring forth great merits. In other words, as long as the lamas have received the secret empowerment, sexually abusing women would not be a violation of the precepts, but would bring forth great merits. This is the essence of Tibetan Buddhism. Therefore, as long as there are lamas, women will inevitably be sexually abused. In his book, The Great Exposition of Tantras, Tsongkhapa teaches the lamas the following concept. You are allowed to kill sentient beings and take others' female dependents as your consorts. This is to tell the lamas that it is fine to kill a person for the sake of practicing the couple practice tantra with his spouse or daughter. What a horrific doctrine! Only demons would act in such a horrible way. Tsongkhapa's Bodhi-way teachings consist of non-Buddhist eternalist concepts based on the six Vijnanas theory. The non-Buddhist eternalists have erroneously replaced Tathagatagarbha, the eighth Vijnana, which is the permanent and indestructible mind taught by the Buddha, with a non-permanent conscious mind. This has absolutely nothing to do with the true Buddha Dharma. The doctrines of Lamaism are completely opposite from those of Orthodox Buddhism. Buddhism preaches the purity of the mind and the elimination of lust and desires. In contrast, Lamaism requires lamas to immerse themselves in sexual pleasure on a daily basis. From this fact alone, we can conclude that the Dalai Lama knows nothing of the Buddha Dharma, and that Lamaism is not Buddhism at all. In his book, The Transformed Mind, Reflection on Truth, Love and Happiness, the Dalai Lama states, sexual misconduct is one of the main factors responsible for destroying the peace of the family and humanity at large. Sexual self-discipline is greatly required, especially now when all over the world we have this terrible disease known as AIDS. These statements contradict those made in the past by Tsongkhapa, the patriarch of Tibetan Buddhism, who repeatedly urged all the lamas to practice the copulation tantra with any woman. In reality, the Dalai Lama disregards the lama's pervasive sexual misconduct, which causes innocent men to become cuckolds and families to be broken. He even urges all the lamas to find real women to practice the copulation tantra with. All these inconsistencies, which are beyond dispute, are really ironic and are a clear evidence of the Dalai Lama's hypocrisy. In 2008, Colin Goldner, a German expert on cults, was interviewed in Austria by Upper Austria News. The topic was the Dalai Lama rates the riot act. He said, as in any other religion, also reported in Tibetan Buddhism, women is nothing. The important thing is, at the heart of Vajrayana Buddhism, as its leader, the Dalai Lama is doing business about the sexual abuse of young girls and women in the guise of Kalachakra Tantra rituals. Colin Goldner further pointed out the world's high regard which His Holiness enjoys across all political and ideological camps, despite all the criticism raised against him for quite some time, remains completely unbroken. He still is regarded as symbol of peacefulness, kindness, and an infinite wisdom of resting serenity. His pronouncements, no matter how trivial, are therefore regarded as the highest expression of knowledge. Such glorifying view of the Dalai Lama is pure projection based on blatant ignorance of the actual connections. Colin Goldner had conducted investigations and researches for 3 years in Dharamsala, home to the Tibetan government in exile, and had thus gained penetrating insights into the Dalai Lama's hypocrisy and the fact that the public has glorified him purely out of ignorance. The Dalai Lama is merely an ordinary person who has not yet eliminated self-view nor become enlightened. He has been able to obtain the worship of an ill-informed public by propagating false stories that he is Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara reincarnated. One might ask, suppose the Dalai Lama was really Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara reincarnated. But would Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara teach his followers to practice the copulation tantra, which is based on vulgar and confining lust? Would he lead all the followers to eat meat and drink alcohol? One might further ask, if the Dalai Lama was really a reincarnation of Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara, why hasn't he even attained the stage of the first fruit? Why isn't he enlightened yet? Obviously, spreading stories about the Dalai Lama being a reincarnation of Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara is nothing but using theocratic means to manipulate the public. This has nothing whatsoever to do with the Buddha Dharma. the wise Taiwanese people cannot accept such far-fetched stories. In 2009, southern Taiwan was devastated by Typhoon Maracut. The disaster was known as the August 8th Taiwan flood. Some Taiwanese politicians had invited the Dalai Lama to come and pray for the victims, while high officials and influential celebrities all curried favor with the Dalai Lama. Only the True Enlightenment Education Foundation could see through his hypocrisy and knew that the prayers from the ceremony over which he presided were completely useless. This is because even though he appears to be preaching compassion, philanthropy, and caring, he is secretly propagating the copulation Tantra and indulges the lamas all over the world to sexually abuse women. Although he is glorified as a Nobel Peace Prize winner, he has failed to comply with the basic precepts which are to be observed by a Buddhist monk. In essence, he does not even possess the attributes of a monk. How can he have the ability to pray for the victims? Any monk in Taiwan who strictly follows the purified precepts will be more qualified than the Dalai Lama to perform this task. In order to expose the true Dalai Lama, to save the Taiwanese from being defrauded of money and belongings in the wake of a dreadful disaster, and more importantly, to help the public see through the fact that Tibetan Lamaism is not Buddhism, the True Enlightenment Education Foundation dauntlessly confronted the political pressure and the popular perception that the Dalai Lama is a holy practitioner. It decided to mobilize 400 people in the last moment to protest peacefully and rationally with banners outside the Kaohsiung arena, where the blessing assembly took place. Through banners which read, "Lamaism, based on the copulation Tantra, is not Buddhism," and "The Dalai Lama's prayers and blessings are useless," the foundation aimed to expose the Dalai Lama's evil acts, such as leading the Lamas into sexual misconduct and destroying countless families. The foundation warned the public to stay far away from Lamaism for its benefit and protection. During the protest, from time to time, a few Tibetan Buddhists with cameras would approach the foundation members and take shots in a provoking manner. Some hurled insults, others grabbed the banners and threw them to the ground. Each of the foundation members remained unaffected and dwelt in their practice of Buddha remembrance. Those who sought confrontation failed without any chance. This protest activity drew widespread media attention across Taiwan. The entire press and media vied to report about the protest activity organized by the True Enlightenment Education Foundation. The Lamaism headed by the Dalai Lama is not Buddhism. The True Enlightenment Education Foundation also publicly called on the Dalai Lama not to take advantage of the Taiwanese people's misfortune and to leave behind the Taiwanese people's hard-earned money, while the country is still grieving from a devastating flood. The foundation urged the Dalai Lama to leave behind the donations collected from his so-called blessing assembly for the relief of the disaster victims. As a result, before leaving Taiwan, the Dalai Lama donated $50,000, a portion of this trip's income. The True Enlightenment Education Foundation, in order to protect Buddha Sakyamuni's true Dharma, to prevent the Lamaistic doctrines based on sexual misconduct to infiltrate the peaceful and orderly practices of Buddhism and deceive the public, to protect the good-hearted Taiwanese people from being defrauded of money and sexually abused, to maintain good social ethics and morals, to maintain the peace of the families and of the society, and knowing the truth that Lamaism is not Buddhism while no one dares to speak up. The Foundation must courageously step forward to turn the tide. Through this protest activity, it has enabled Taiwanese people to understand that Tibetan Buddhism is based on the adulterous practice of the copulation Tantra. This is truly a groundbreaking achievement. Dr. Huinan Yang, former professor of philosophy at the National Taiwan University and an expert of the history of Buddhism, said that in the early days, the yoga practice was indeed a religious cultivation method in India. At present, some branches of Tibetan Buddhism have incorporated Hinduistic practices, including the copulation practice, and thus the essence of their teachings have notably deviated from that of traditional Buddhism highlighted by Buddha Sakyamuni. The Foundation's warnings and criticism have nothing surprising. Professor Yang has thoroughly studied the Buddha Dharma for decades, and his ability to perceive the non-Buddhist nature of Tibetan Buddhism should be applauded. The Dalai Lama, glorified as a Nobel Peace Prize winner, is in fact a devoted practitioner of sexual intercourse, who encourages lamas to sexually abuse women and destroy the peace of families. The doctrines of Tibetan Buddhism have absolutely nothing to do with the practices and realization contents of the Buddha Dharma. Once you realize that the truth behind the mysterious veil of Tibetan Buddhism is so unbearable and obscene, shouldn't you be alarmed and flee away from it as quickly as possible? Anyone who wishes to learn the Buddha Dharma, please stay far away from Tibetan Buddhism, which is the total opposite of Buddhism. Any woman who does not want to be sexually assaulted by lamas under the name of the Buddha Dharma, please stay far away from Tibetan Buddhism. Any man who refuses to be cuckolded in secrecy by lamas and suffer from broken families, please advise your beloved wives and daughters to stay far away from Tibetan Buddhism.